Good morning, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this video, we're going to tackle doing the timing belt on my 1995 Mazda Miata that's in the background there, but we're also going to be doing a whole lot more than that. We've got cam seals, we've got crank seals, we've got water pumps, all sorts of fun things to do while we're down in the area, and I'm going to show you how to do them all. So without further ado, let's get started. So while our coolant's draining, we're going to go ahead and take out our plastic upper air intake. So we've got a clamp here, there's a clamp there, we've got a clamp here we got to move so we can get these hoses off, and then this hose will just kind of come off. So we're going to get that knocked out, and got to get this done. And we've got a whole lot more we need to do. Let's get these loose. Try not to drop your screwdriver down into the bowels of the engine bay. That's not necessarily ever a good thing. And it's going to fight you when you first try to get it off. If you don't have this stuff super loose, it'll not want to go. As you can see, that came right off. And then on this line here, we got to take it off at either end. You can kind of pick which side you want. You can use a fancy tool. I prefer pliers. Either way. So as you can see, we already have a bunch more real estate. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get this hose out of the way. I want to loosen it at this end here. I may take it off of both ends because honestly that's looking kind of crusty. Might be worthy for me to clean it. But again, we got to do this because we want to get our radiator out. And again, there's a fancy tool you can use. I actually have that tool, but sometimes it's more aggravating than what it's actually worth. So you can just, you get a good grip on it, and you can change to regular pliers if you need to. You can just kind of walk those clamps back. And something to keep in mind, if you haven't had these hoses off in a long time, you might want to take a pick and get around the entrance of the hose, kind of crack it loose. And that will make it way easier to get this off. And when you go to take it off, you're going to want to twist to finish breaking it loose, and then it should come loose pretty easily. So I took my pick, this guy here, got under it, and sure enough, I can now rotate it, and it's kind of crusty. Can I get enough on it? Yes, I can. And in doing that, I actually loosen this end. There you go. So that's out of the way. So this isn't too bad. It does have a little crust on it. Might hit it with a wire wheel or something like that. Still trying to get over that cold. All right. These lines are small. I don't want to mess with this unless I have no other choice, because small lines tend to rust through and things like that, and it's just no bueno. But we shall see. All right, we're going to have some electrical that we're going to need to take out in order to get the radiator out. We also got to remove our overflow tube here. Get it off of this side. That way we don't have to unclip it from all of this. All right, same deal. Use a pick. Okay, you guys can see. Sometimes I can't tell if you guys can see or not, so. But same deal, get a pick. We're gonna work it in there. Sometimes you can't get all the way in there. If you can't, that's okay, do what you can, but notice when I first went to pull that, it didn't want to go, but after I broke loose what was around the edge, boom, Comes right off. Okay. So that is that. We're going to need to pull electrical for the fans. And since my car is an AC car, it's going to have connections, one to each fan, because I think if you have a non-AC car, you actually only wind up with one electric fan attached to the radiator. So you see we got one here, we got one there, and they're actually not the same size. It's kind of interesting setup. But we're going to need, looks like we've got a connection over here that we got to undo. I'm going to have to eyeball that a little more closely to get that out. Okay, and it also looks like we've got some clamps, the bolt heads there, and right there. So we can either take that loose or we can bend this out of the way, which I think that's what somebody did at one point, which is why this doesn't push all the way down. Either or, but once we get those out and we get the electricals broken loose, I mean, this hose, this is power steering hose. It's going to probably try to fight us a little bit because it kind of bows into the fan area. But other than that, we should be able to lift the radiator assembly out of the way. I don't even think we got to pull the under tray. We'll see. All right, so there is a series of 8 and 10 millimeter bolts down here. We are going to have to drop the under tray so we can get access to the lower radiator hose. So we've got one up there. We got this guy in the corner. There's a bunch along the front. And then there's this guy kind of lurking back there. And you've got the exact same thing on the other side. Get all those out. Don't forget to plug your radiator again. And that should let us drop the under tray. The under tray is actually longer than this. I had to chop mine because it was torn and was dragging on the ground. But it should be a bit longer. But I think that's still the same number of bolts. Okay, here's what we look like with our under tray off. So one thing I found is there is a clamp that holds, it's to hold an AC line in place to keep it from rattling around on you. And there's a, I think it's a 10 millimeter that goes right there. Yeah, this guy here. Just take that out, swing it out of the way. You've got this nut that's supposed to go on a stud that actually holds the clamp, and mine's busted. So anyway, get that out of the way, and then you'll notice the last thing we really have down here is our lower radiator hose that we got to pull, and I will work on that. I'm going to move my catch tray underneath here because it's probably got some stuff in it that didn't drain out. And you'll see that this side's bucking around. It's because this thing up there was bent out of the way. But if you don't bend it out of the way up top, you got to take care of those two nuts up top, which I still need to do. Anyway, this, then we should be able to pull the radiator out. All right, so those radiator support bolts, which apparently somebody's been into the radiator on this one because I have 2 different bolts, but 13 millimeter is what they were. And it's possible that this car was in some kind of a front end fender bender that was not disclosed to me based on what I'm seeing. Seeing some weirdness below as well, but at this point we should be able to start trying to pull this out, seeing what we get caught on. There's still something holding fast on the driver's side. I gotta go figure that out. Well, that's definitely loose. So what is holding us here? There it goes. It was caught actually on the metal lip of the core support. Okay. All right, so we don't need to take that out. That's good. Start lifting this up. If you have a condenser, do be mindful of it, right? We don't want to smash it. Okay. And also be mindful of your radiator. You don't want to smash that. That would be no good. What is that about? I don't know. But yeah, see how this is on the passenger side. Somebody bent that way out. And then there's this guide knob, I guess, held in by a clip. Probably would help to remove that. And then here's the top. Somebody bent that out of shape too. But we are loose. As I mentioned, we have a ring of bolts we need to take out. They are 10 millimeter. You don't have to take these out. These are only holding this rail in. But you've got all those around. You have 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the valve cover that need to come out. It goes without saying that your plugs or your wires need to come out, and then the actual spark plugs underneath them, they got to come out as well. So we are going to do all of that. And be careful when you try to take your PCV valve off, because I just went to take mine off and I think I broke it. So I have to get a new one. And you can still get them at your local parts store, but they're like $15 or something ridiculous. So try not to break it, particularly when that was relatively new. These are in somewhat tight. Some of them are anyway. I have this thing on setting number 2, which is kind of interesting. All right, let's get those wires out. 1. I might get new wires too while I'm at it. I had a rodent chew on these, and they didn't punch through anything, but you know, I don't like it. And it's not like you can just wrap electrical tape on it, because this is much higher voltage. So it has the ability to jump. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. And another good thing to always check is make sure as you pull stuff that the bolts are all the same length, so you can just kind of mix them and you don't get burned by putting the wrong length bolt in the wrong place. These look like they're all the same so far. Yeah, some of them have smears of oil on them, which doesn't surprise me. I knew this was leaking from the valve cover gasket. Not terrible, but definitely leaking. So get these out of the way. Yep, there's the front part. Oh, I wonder, can I take the whole coil assembly up with me? Looks like I might. All right, I'll dig into that. All right, you will have to take the coil out, and it is a pair of 12 millimeter bolts right there. And you can use a short, I mean, mine weren't in very tight, but short 12. That'll get you in there, get you done. And there is, on the driver's side, there's a little bracket here, and that's to provide a little, like a horseshoe, slide a connector on. So keep up with that, get the coil off, because you could take the whole coil with you, but you have to disconnect the coil power wires in the back, and those are really tough to get to. So it's easier just to pop the valve cover off itself. And, you know, there you go. Let's see how much I can get a set of wires for, if at all. If I keep them in that order there, and since these are nicely labeled, I'll preserve my firing order, which is nice. Anyway, let me get that out of the way. We'll get this cover off, see what we're working with. All right, time for the grand reveal. Bum, 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 bum. We have the valve train. All right. Oh, okay, so something just fell out. What was that? Ah, that would be the gut to my PCV valve. Not worried about that. Yeah, there's some grit in there. So hey, turns out you don't have to take your spark plugs out. And I know you guys can't see, somebody has done the valve cover before. I see traces of RTV. And they were enthusiastic with the RTV. I'll put it that way. Okay, let's get down and dirty in here. Let's talk about what we can see. So this is our main target today. The timing belt. We can now see the top of it, which is very cool. Now, here's the thing. Okay, you're looking at this. You may say, man, I don't see any cracks in it. This thing's great. Here's the thing. Timing belts, you cannot visually inspect them and get a good determination on whether or not they're good. You can't. Done a ton of reading on that because I'm trying to, there's a particular Japanese sports car I want, but it's notorious for timing belts breaking on it because people don't change them out. There's an easy way to look at the timing belt, but it don't earn you anything. So anyway, we will be taking this cover off. We'll get more visibility. But here's our belt. Here's our cam sprockets. This is a dual cam engine, so that's what this guy is right here. That's a cam. And that is actually an analog computer that tells the valves when to open. So everything works like it's supposed to. It's kind of neat when you look at it that way. Taking a look in here, looks pretty clean. So the previous owner before me, at least, they were doing their oil changes. Because if they weren't, this is where you would see it. Is here. You would see sludge and heavy varnish. And I don't see either. And this engine has 210,000 miles on it. So they kept up with the oil changes. It's good. We can also look at our cams here, and we do see signs of wear, which is exactly what we would expect to see. 210,000 miles. But we don't see any scoring marks or pitting or anything that would indicate that, again, we weren't getting sufficiently oiled. So that right there, fine. If I can run my fingernail across it and it doesn't catch, we're doing all right. And again, 210,000 miles. We're doing good. Now that we do have this, we're going to go ahead. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're going to go ahead and take this front cover off so we get better visibility on everything. We're also going to mosey on down to our water pump pulley. And while we still have all of our belts on providing lots of tension, we are going to break these 3 bolts loose. We're not going to take them out, but we're going to break them loose. Because once you take all the belts off, you have no way to really tighten this thing up. And it can get kind of interesting if you don't use an impact tool to break this stuff loose. Once again, grand reveal. Got some, got a gasket right there, it looks like. And a gasket here too. Okay. So just so you guys know, almost every single time I make a video, I've never done the job before. Unless it's something mundane like flushing brakes or oil changes, you know, stuff like that. But big things like this, I've almost never done it before. So often I am very surprised when I'm working on this stuff. Never done it before. Now I will watch other people's videos and stuff, so I don't lead you guys astray and I don't break my own stuff, but a lot of times I'm just kind of digging in until I get stuck on something. In case you didn't know. All right. So, I mean, we still, again, like I said, a visual inspection will not give you joy, but unless it's something really bad, like the cogs of the belt are missing chunks, in that case, you are looking at an imminent failure of your belt. I don't see that, which is nice. There is one way that we can tell if our belt was still okay or not okay, but we can't tell until we take it off, unfortunately. So if you're already in here this far, you might as well just take it off. Okay, updates. So as you can see, loosen these up like I said I would. And they are 10 millimeters. I loosen this up. This is a 21 millimeter. And we may have to tighten that up and loosen it back up again a little later because we're going to need to turn the engine over a bit. But what I'm going to focus on now is we'll go ahead and start taking off belts. So this is power steering, right? Power steering, AC to here. Now what we can do is we can loosen the tension at the power steering. There's a nut buried in there. It's 14 millimeter. We're going to need to loosen that. And then in order to loosen the tensioner itself, you need to loosen this nut here. And what that should let you do, if I remember how to do this right, is then you can start turning this, and if you'll back it out, and that'll loosen this belt. And once that belt's loose, it comes off. And then for our alternator, I think we got a similar gig going on, though I'm not sure the exact setup. So it looks like we got a bolt up there, probably another 14. And then over here, it's kind of hidden. Let's see if I can sneak you in there. There we go. This is the actual tensioner. So yeah, that unlocks the tensioner itself. That's the head we use to adjust. Is it a 12? That's a 12. Can we loosen it? We sure can. All right. And what about this? Are you a 12? Yeah, you're a 12. So I'm going to do it this way so I'm not... Oh. That's going to be fun to go get. I wonder... All right, let me go grab that and then see if I can finish loosening this up. Okay, so what I found out is if you basically take that bolt out, loosen this up, right, then you get tons of slack, and you do need to loosen up that 14, but then don't be like me and then try to take it off, and then it falls somewhere and you have absolutely no earthly clue where it fell to. So now I got to go track down a spare nut or find this nut. But anyway, that will give you lots of slack, as you can see. Then, if you're pushing it down, you should just be able to pop the belt right off. See, once you get that out of the way, you get plenty of adjustment. Now, where did that nut go? That would be awfully nice to find. Okay, so we'll get this belt out of the way. And this belt, I have a replacement. I actually replaced this one, I think, some time ago. Anyway, set that up there. Thing has a locked up engine, so I've not been working on it out of spite because I don't want to rip apart a massive 460 big block, but that might be where things are going. All right, now I gotta find that nut. Anyway, let me find that. Go figure this out again. Okay guys, figured it out. This bolt down here, the one I said you needed a nut on the front, may not actually need the nut, but you will need to break it loose. It is a 14, and I used a ratcheting wrench here, but it was on real tight, so I used the old timer's trick of locking the open ends together, give myself some leverage. And that got it loose, and now, as you can see, alternator's loose, and we can get that belt off. All right, so now this is why we went ahead and broke these loose, nice and easy. Just get these 3 out, because now it'd be kind of tricky to pin this and do that. Boom, just like that. Okay, the last thing we will do is we want to make this as easy as possible to do. So we're going to get the rest of these coolant and electrical lines out of the way. So like there's a sensor right over there we need to pull out, or at least the wire for it, right? Careful with that ground. Get these little hoses out of the way. I didn't want to mess with them, but I guess we're going to have to kind of just get this whole area clear, right? So that we can do what we got to do. Alrighty. All right. So we have a bolt right there. We remove that bolt, we can get a piece of our timing cover off. And it looks like we have, okay, there's an actual gasket here, though it's pretty thrashed. So I'm going to put these two together, right, so we don't lose them. And then we can get the other side. Oh, we got a bolt right there holding the other side of that cover on. And then once we got that, that should expose both the water pump and the rest of our timing assembly. So let's go ahead and get that done. I lied. There are 2 more, in my case, very crusty. These are 10mm bolts there and there. They're going to need to come out to get the rest of this cover off. Then we can actually work on our timing belt and our water pump. Okay, so I lied a little bit. There's a few more bolts that are actually hidden behind this accessory pulley, harmonic balancer, crank pulley here. And they are 10mm. I've gotten them out. Apparently, this whole thing will just slide over the main crank bolt. Though we gotta get it loose, so I'm probably gonna get a mallet and give this some loving taps and see if I can't break that loose so I can just get this off. And once once that's out of the way, we can get to the last couple of bolts holding this cover on, get it out of the way, and then finally do our timing stuff. And when I said mallet, I lied. Again, I really meant my 4-pound hammer. But even then, you see I'm not going super crazy here. Just trying to see if I can wiggle this loose. Maybe I missed a bolt. Let's see. I did. That's why it won't come out. So there's 4 of those total. So I got 3, but number 4 I didn't grab. So let me do that and then try this again. Alright, so I was able to actually still sneak a impact tool in there under the front sway bar. Get this final little 10mm out. There it is. And this appears to be pretty loose now, if I can just walk it off. Oh, we got a big washer type thing here. So get that out of the way. Oh. Yeah, I have that right there. That's not right though. Oh no, where did I put those? Well, I put them somewhere, and I'll find them. Yeah, there he is, right there. That's where I put it. So we'll put this up there too. And then, yeah, it wants to come out. Might be a two-handed thing. because it's going to have to come out just right around the big washer thing that's a, well, or I could just do this and cheat since I already made this loose. 21 millimeter, by the way, on that one. And when you go to take this out, you're going to want to put the e-brake on, put the car in 5th gear. I actually put it in reverse, and that worked out for me. There we go. And there that is. So now that we have the balancer out, running out of room to put stuff, but I'll put that right there. We'll move this over there. I'm going to put the crank bolt back in. We still need it to get the engine prepared to take the timing belt off. But that's how that works. With that, oh, I'd already gotten the belts. It just, I couldn't get around the crank pulley. Or the bolts. Words. Okay. Come on. There we go. Okay, and these guys are going to go here. Now notice we have the top bolt was longer, and then the two at the bottom were shorter. So keep that in mind. Like I said earlier, that can bite you in the butt hard if you're not paying attention. But with that, we do finally have everything exposed. But before we take our belt off, there is two more basic things we got to do to make sure we are ready to swap belts and not have any issues. By the way, if you have a 1.6 liter engine and you're following this, now is a great time to check your Woodruff key and see if that has gotten worn out. It's a known issue with the short snout, short crank. 1.6s, I don't think it's as much of an issue with 1.8s, but great time to check that. This one looks fine. So, just throwing that out there. Okay, so what needs to happen now is we need to get the engine lined up on what's called top dead center. And if you've never done this sort of thing before, it basically means that we want to turn this crank bolt clockwise until the piston located inside of cylinder number 1 is at the very top of its travel. If you can imagine, running along the middle here, there are 4 pistons, and those 4 pistons, they do this. They move up and down in a certain order, right? So we want number 1 to be at the very top of its travel and stop there. We don't want it here, we don't want it there, we want it up here. But furthermore, we're going to want it on, I think, the intake stroke, because as a piston moves up and down, there are 2 times where it'll be in that position. And we want it, I believe, on intake. Now, the easiest way to do that, because we don't have our timing marks anymore down here that would tell us that, is we're going to take out the spark plug for number 1. That's why you see this. And then we're going to put something in there that's long, that won't get eaten by the engine, so something metal preferably. And we're going to rotate until we see whatever we stick in there. Screwdriver's handy. Until we see it start to rise up to the very, as tall as it's going to go. And then we stop it there before it begins to go back down. Then we'll be able to check the various marks you see on the cam gears here, and that'll let us know if we're on the right part of the cycle, right? The intake or the exhaust stroke. And you see we have an E, and there's also an I down here. That's for intake. And we just want to get the setup right. So this is going to be the, I think, the exhaust cam, and this is the intake cam. And what should wind up happening, I think, is that we can get our our timing mark, which is, well, might be the eye, but we're going to want it pointing at a certain direction is what we want. And they'll both be pointing the same way on both sides. And that's when we know where we need to be before we lock everything in position and then take our belt off. Because right now, you see how this belt is under tension? The belt is holding our time. And by time, I mean when these various pistons are supposed to come up and down, and when the valves, which is what our cams actually control, like what I talked about earlier, telling them when is the right time to open and close as the pistons are moving up and down. They have to do it in a certain sequence for the engine to actually make power and do what it's supposed to do. If you get them out of sequence, stuff can break. Not so much of a danger on this engine because it's what's called a non-interference engine, meaning that even if your time gets lost, and that's what this belt does, is it holds that sequence, right? If it gets lost or it gets set wrong, things will not hit each other. There's enough room between when the valve comes down and the piston comes up that they'll get really close, but they won't hit. So if you get it wrong, hopefully nothing bad happens when you crank it. But most modern engines, they don't do that. They run so close and so tight that if the time is wrong, bam, they smash into each other. And that's called an interference engine. And when they smash into each other, the piston is pretty strong, but the valve is not as strong. So normally what happens is valves will bend and break, and then the surface of your piston will get gouged and scratched, and it's a mess. It's a big mess, and you don't want that. So that's why this belt is so important, and why you have to change it, and why everything has to be right before you take it off. I know that's a very long-winded explanation, but I try to let people know why we're doing what we're doing, not necessarily do this because I said so. Because I don't know about you guys, but I have a very curious mind, and I want to know the why behind stuff as I do it. You know. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and pop this out. There we go. And this is a spark plug socket. So it should have a little rubber boot in it that will hang on to the spark plug so it doesn't fall, or you would potentially smash your electrode or something like that. Or just won't grab it at all. So anyway, let me work on that. You can use a magnet sometimes if you can't get your socket to grab it. Let me get that out and we'll do the rest of what I just talked about. Okay, so when you do this, it's recommended to take all your spark plugs out so that way you don't have a ton of compression that's going to fight you. So what will happen is when it's getting to the point where you're hitting a compression stroke, you'll feel a bunch of resistance as you're trying to turn this. But as you can see we're going up, 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 still going up, still going up. And I'm turning the crank bolt to the right, and I do not have it in gear right now. I have it in neutral because I'm trying to minimize resistance so I can get this exactly where it needs to be. So we're still going up. Still going up. Okay, that's it. We're really close. I think that's it. I believe that's top dead center. And a way that you know you got it, get my phone out of my holder here, is if you take a look, you'll notice this I on intake is at 12 o'clock, and this E is basically at 12 o'clock. So that's how we know, in addition to the fact that we're about as high as we can go. As you notice, we go back, we're going down, right? And then if I go forward, going up, but then that last little bit, we're starting to head back down. And you'll notice the I is a little bit past 12. And I'll bear this out. Let me reset my breaker bar here. Okay, breaker bar is reset. And you'll notice I start pulling it here. We are now heading down, right? So we're not going where we need to be. So where we want the I at 12, we want our E at 12. And then we got to lock it all in place, right? Because remember, I talked about in that long, boring segment, we need to lock our timing. Even once we have the belt off, we need to be able to lock it so it doesn't move. You may be thinking, well, what's going to make it move? Well, see those springs for your valves? That's what makes the valves close again, is those springs. And as long as they're there, if you have nothing that's fighting that spring pressure, which that's what this belt is doing right now, take that off, this is going to go woof until these springs unwind, and then you're out of time, and then you got to fix it. We don't want that. So we need to lock time, and I'll show you 2 ways to do that. So there are actually 3 different ways that I know of to lock time. One way is you can get a tool that will feed in between these gears and keep them from moving, your cam gears. And that's great if the only thing you're doing is your timing belt. But if you want to do the cam seals behind the gears, well, then you can't use the gears. You got to take them off. The other way is if you take a look here, I should say way number 2. See that? See how that looks like a hex nut? There's one here. There's one here. This one is 24 millimeters. This one is 26 millimeters. So you can take 2 crescent wrenches, or in my case, I actually have a 24 and a 26, oddly enough. Okay, well, it's not quite a 26. But you can take your wrenches, cross them, and then take some locking pliers and lock it right here. So that way things can't turn, right? Because you're sitting on those flats, nothing's going to budge. That's way number 2. That's the most common way if you're wanting to also do your cam seals. Way number 3, and this is not a cheap tool, but it makes it super simple, easy, is you can get this tool from Jazz Performance. They are in the UK. And you'll notice it's the same kind of deal. You got a pair of wrenches here. On the right side is a 24, left side's 26. You loosen up the nuts, you let the tool spread, and then it'll lock in, as you can see, on those nuts. And then you make everything tight, stuff won't budge. So that way you can also still do all your cam seals and everything. And it makes things super stupid, simple, easy, and you don't have to worry about your wrenches tumbling over or anything like that. I had to pay for that, and I'm in the United States, so I had to pay a lot for that, but I wanted this super simple, easy, not being endorsed by Jazz Performance at all. But do check them out. They have a ton of Miata products that you can go get. Some stuff that Flying Miata doesn't have, or Moss Miata doesn't have. But you do get stung by the overseas shipping charge, right? Anyway, I'm going to use this tool, but that's the 3 different ways that you commonly see to hold your cams still so that we can safely take the belt off. Okay, so we locked in our cams, right? So they can't really turn all that much at this point in time. And then got to take this guy loose again. All right, so after you double check that you have gotten everything settled and ready, we're going to loosen up the tensioner. It's 14 millimeter. Just loosen her up a little bit. And then we got to take this tensioner spring off. There's fancy tools for taking this stuff off. I'm probably just going to take some locking needle nose pliers, hook it around one side, and pull it off. And once that's pulled off, that's the last thing holding tension on the belt, and we can just slide it off. All right, so we're going to get in here. Lock up tight on that. Okay, not quite tight enough. And there we go. Okay, we got that out. Ah, I didn't want to let go. At this point, should just be able to take it off. And this is also that kind of pucker factor moment, because at this point, if you do not have something holding your cam stuff in place, you're in trouble. So let's hope your tool for your cams is good to go. And also, you can't adjust it at this point on. So it is what it is. So this is why we needed to take the snout off the bolt. Got to slide this thing out. Once this thing's out, you've got a clear access to getting the belt off around the crank. Now at this point, I have to emphasize, you've got nothing that is holding all your timing in place between the cam and the crank. So don't move anything at all. Okay? Bad stuff will happen if you do. Well, as I explained earlier, not necessarily bad stuff, but annoying stuff. So make sure you got your holding tool. I mean, at this point, you should already have all that done. We're beyond all that now. So now, remember how I mentioned that we could check the status of the belt once we had it off? So you can take a look. As you can see, the belt looks fantastic. But what you want to really check is how supple the belt is. So how well does it flex? And when you do something like this, how does it do? Now see how on this belt, no problem. So this belt probably got changed out before I got the car, and it was relatively recent-ishly. Because I'm kinking it, no problem. This belt probably could have ran on it for thousands of miles, no problems whatsoever. But I didn't know. I didn't know. And I could not take the risk, which is why we're in here doing this. But yeah, this one was fine. But like I said, you can't tell until you get it off. That's when you can check. And if you're going to take it off, you might as well put a new one on. They're not that expensive. Okay. So we've gone all the way in. We're all exposed. Now, if you are just wanting to do a timing belt, cool, you're done. Put your new belt on. Redo the tensioner spring. Let it see where it pulls the tensioner, because that's what it's for, is to set the pre-tension on the tensioner. And then tighten it up and, everything in reverse, and you're done. But we're not just doing that. We're going to do water pump. We're going to do a ton of gaskets. We're going to do the cam seals. We're going to do the crank seal. All that jazz. So we're going to keep going. All right. I had to actually get my impact driver out to get these loose, and I had to make some adjustments here because this wasn't holding the way I wanted to. But we got these out. impact driver. Its name is UGA. And it gets the job done. These run pretty tight. I'm going to suspect that they've never come off before. So I suspect someone has done timing jobs. I suspect somebody's done water pumps. Probably. But remember, we're looking for our I to be at the top over here and our E to be at the top over here, right? Let's keep that in mind. Put this over in the pile of parts, and I believe these are pretty much symmetrical as far as their marks go, so you can put either one in either place. And these are the bolts I was talking about. And then I haven't even made my way down to the water pump bolts yet. We'll go ahead and knock this out. And oh my, that's a lot of RTV I'm gonna have to clean up. All right, so this should just come out. All right, and there are our cam seals in all their glory. Yay. All right, moving on down the line. Get this out. Make sure you come up with some kind of system to keep your bolts with whatever it is that they need to be with. Because we're taking a lot of stuff apart and we don't want to lose anything. Yeah, so it looks like we have 1, 2, there's one hiding under the idler there, 3, coming on down, 1 there, there, in there, and then not sure how this guy comes off, but he's gonna have to come off too, probably. I'll figure him out in a bit. But all these guys got to come out. So I'm guessing those are all 14s, looks like. And then we'll have the water pump exposed. Oh, looks like, if this is our water pump here, we got a bolt over here that's got to come out too. So we can get that to come out. And actually, I think this is all water pump up here, where my finger is, and then this is something else. So maybe this does not come off. It's just these bolts up here that need to move. All right, so we're looking pretty good. All right, so there's our water pump, and I was right. It's only these upper bolts. Now you notice it doesn't quite want to come off. That's because there's a bolt there and there. You can actually see the threading for it. It comes in sideways, so you need to get a wrench, hopefully a ratcheting wrench, kind of sneak it in there and get those off. You may have to take this guy out of the way in order to get the access you need. And then the water pump should be good to come off. Apparently we're going to have a challenge with this guy here. I have a couple of tricks, but you know. And yeah, the water pump's probably going to pee a little bit. Push that back in so it'll stop peeing. Because I don't think this will do it, but we don't want to let coolant mix with oil. That's bad. We don't want that. Otherwise you're doing an oil change, which, Anyway, let me get the 2 on the side over here. Also, by the way, if you cannot track down a gasket for this, you're going to have to RTV it, because oddly enough, the kit that I bought from R-Speed has everything under the sun except this gasket. I have no clue why, but it doesn't. And I need a square gasket, and I can't find one. So I'm going to have to RTV it, which you can do. That's perfectly okay. It's going to slow you down. But yeah, Anyway, let me get this done. All right, what I wound up having to do is because of how I took the power steering pump out, I was able just to move the whole thing out of the way. That gave me the access I needed to get at that top one with a ratchet, which let me get it out. So now, there it goes. And you see how this has a square gasket? I can't find that anywhere. So I'm going to have to RTV it, which is great. So taking a look at this water pump, it looks pretty good. Again, I'm going to suspect that somebody did the timing belt and at least the water pump recent-ishly is my thought. So that leaves us with this, and that is our bundle of joy right there. Now, the best part about things like water pumps that have little paper gaskets is you get to scrape all that off and get it clean. And you're probably going to want to shove some paper towels in the opening for the pump, so that way junk doesn't get in there. All right, the very last thing that we're going to need to tear down before we can start rebuilding is this, our crank gear. And apparently this guy likes to be very, very stuck. So your options are to pry it out. Some people will heat this gear up and pry. I don't know of any specialty tools to get this out. Okay, some updates. Not great updates. Do not pry. I'm a lying liar who lies. Do not pry. That's not how we need to do this. So the teeth are fine, but part of what this flange does is it keeps the timing gear from wandering. So if this, or timing belt, sorry. So if this is broken, the belt may try to jump into it and tear it to pieces, and it would happen within seconds. So I cannot use this anymore. It has to come out. It has to be replaced. But before we do any of that, what's holding this in position on the crank is this woodruff key. And we need to try to get it out. So I'm going to try this particular trick. I probably need both hands to do it, but the idea is you grab on to your woodruff key real tight, and then you start to pry against the gear and use that as a lever. See if you can't pop it out. That's what we're trying to do here. So what's probably going to also end up happening here is I'm going to need a new woodruff key. Not what I planned for, not ideal. I'll have to order those in. It's going to stop me cold for a couple of days, but it is what it is. We got to do this right. We can go this deep and do it. So I'm going to fight with this, try to get this woodruff key out, and I'll keep you posted. Okay, updates. I got the woodruff key out, and though it does look kind of scary, it's actually not that scary. I could file that down and reuse this key. Hopefully this thing's not insanely expensive. I'd prefer to put a new one in. But how I got it out is, this is something I saw from another YouTuber, and he got it from his local Miata or Mazda dealership. Take some wire cutters, some good ones. Get it flush. Grab onto the woodruff key just as hard as you can, and then pry outward in this direction. You'll wind up using the snout of the crank as a fulcrum, and you will be able to start pulling the woodruff key out. You may have to do it a couple of times. That's what I had to do about 4 or 5 times before I finally got it clear enough to wiggle out. But it came out. And now there's nothing that actually connects this gear to this shaft. It's the woodruff key that's supposed to do that. With the key out, what we should be able to do is come in with like a screwdriver and a hammer or something and start trying to bop this sideways to make it turn. And if once we get it turning, should come off. Give you an example of what I mean here. So got my pry bar, got it in between, and I actually already bumped it a bunch. Not actually a ton, but just took my hammer, right? Got it spinning. In fact, I was able to do it in such a way, I don't even think I damaged the teeth. And then it comes right off. Yeah, I'm glad I took it off. Check this out. So that's what I broke, right? That's cracked. That would have been a liability. That would have failed at some point down the road and been bad. So I think if you're willing to sacrifice your woodruff key, that method works really, really well. Because when you look here at the teeth, I didn't even damage them. See that? So I would say no prying. Just be willing to sacrifice a woodruff key. And if you are, get your woodruff key out, and then you just tap this thing till it begins to spin pretty easily. Out it comes, just like that. All right, folks, welcome back. Today is a new day. I put a pin on this for a couple of weeks now because I had to get parts and other stuff was coming up. But we're back, and where we're picking up is removing our crank seal. Now, here's the trick of it. You have a sealing surface right there against the water pump. You have a sealing surface here against the crank. So what we're going to need to do is take a pick and carefully hook into the crank seal itself and then pop it out. Cam seals we can do a lot easier. There's a trick we can do, but the crank seal, unfortunately, we have to do it like this. One other thing that you probably could do is if you got yourself a little screwdriver or a couple of little, screws, you could drill some screws, maybe 1-2 places, and kind of wiggle it out. I may wind up doing it that way. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm thinking about it though, but I'd have to chop my screws down a little bit because your actual seal width is maybe like that. So if you have an overly long screw, well, you're going to blow right through your seal and then damage something on the backside before you can even get the screw in deep enough to do something. So keep that in mind. Okay, got the seal out. Fortunately, it's not sitting in there too tight. I use that extra curl back there lets you get some leverage. So let me get that out, and then if we get in there and take a look, no damage to the sealing surface. You know, I'm going to take some brake clean and clean that up, but we didn't damage our sealing surface, which is good. So we'll clean that up, and then we'll go ahead and we're going to work on inserting our new seal. We should be able to push it in partly by hand. It does go in dry. And then we got a couple different tricks we can use to get it to seat. All right, sorry for the super zoom here, but I did want you to kind of see what was up. So when we go to install our new seal, like I said, it is installed dry. We do not want to install it with any kind of lubricant or RTV or anything like that. Here's our seal. It's going to look absolutely enormous, but there it is. So you see how there's a little spring in here? That's going to be facing the block, so it's going to be installed like this. And like I said, we can start pushing this in by hand. but it's not going to be all the way seated, and it's also going to be a little uneven. So a couple different ways you can go about this. In my case, I'm going to go grab an appropriate size socket that will line up with this rim right here. And then we can gently tap the seal in to get it to seat and get it flush. Another thing I have seen people do is you take your old seal, you squish it up against your new seal, and then you take something like a piece of something, and then you use your crank bolt to suck it all in, make it tight. I'm going to go with the socket method. Be right back. Okay, I got the seal in. I got it in with a 38 millimeter socket. I didn't even have to tap it or hammer it or anything. It just went in. But one thing I want to point out is when you do it like this, number one, you know, it lines up perfect. So that's fantastic. Goes right in. But the thing you really, really need to watch out for that almost got me is you see this little lip right here that I'm pressing with my thumb? Make sure that this doesn't get tucked in like that as you're pushing the seal in. I had a couple of spots where it was trying to do that, and I had to use my pick to kind of press it out correctly. And the end result is I think I've got the seal in correctly. I don't think it's going to leak. It seems to be nice and flush and seated, and it's not pushed in too far. But keep an eye out for that little lip. That's really important. I mean, the main part of your seal is, see this groove part right here in the middle? That's the main part of the seal. That's the part that needs to be right. But you also want to make sure those lips are okay. All right, well, with that done, that is one of our 3 seals down, and our cam seals are going to be way, way easier as long as we have a torque tool. All right, I'm going to leave it zoomed in so you guys can see, but cam shaft seals, right? So the easy way to do this is you loosen the cam caps, which are these aluminum things above the seal. There's 2 bolts, they're 10 millimeter either side, and then the seal just pops right out, and it's just super easy. It's cheesy easy. However, there's a very specific torque value for putting them back on. It's effectively 8 to 10 foot-pounds, okay? 8 to 10 foot-pounds, which is not much at all. And unfortunately, I don't have that wrench on me right now. I'll let somebody borrow it. So your choices are, you can pull these out the same way you pulled out the cam seal, right? And run that risk. Make sure you don't hit a sealing surface. Or if you trust your elbow, you loosen these up, you slide the old ones out, put your new ones in, and torque it to what you think is good if you trust your calibrated elbow. Your call. I'm kind of on this because you don't want this to be loose because it'll leak oil and might do some other chaos because this is, you know, your cams, right? So I'm probably going to do it the hard way. And if you're going to do it the hard way, same rules apply. Be really careful with not scratching up a sealing surface, and then you're going to need a way to squish them back in. I've got that 38 millimeter that I can use to tap it back in. Wish me luck. So I lied. I started trying to pry into the cam seals. I didn't like it. It wasn't dropping in like you did with the crank seal, and I just, So I've loosened up the caps, trying to get the cap itself loose. It seems very tight. All I'm doing is getting junk I don't know if somebody glued it or what. I almost think in my case somebody's been in here before and they did it, because those bolts were not tightened to 10 foot-pounds. They were way tighter than that. So, anyway, I'm trying to get these caps loose. They are tight, like they're not budging. So I'm gonna keep working on this. We can't get in there and pry because we could damage a sealing surface, right? Can't do that. So, But the idea is if you get these completely loose, you just lift them up and you can just push the seal out from the back. No problem. So if I can get to that point, I'll film it and show it to you. Okay, after some very careful tapping, I have broken the exhaust cam cap loose, as you can see. So if you're curious what that looks like on the other side, see that's all sealing surface there. Well, that's the bearing. Can't mess with that. Then there's your sealing surface. You don't want to mess with that. So you can't get a pry tool in here at all. You will screw all this up and you'll be in a world of hurt. Exhaust needs to go on exhaust, intake on intake. So basically exhaust is going to go on the right on the driver's side. Intake will go on the left on the passenger side. But now you can see seal comes right off. So that's how that works. Then we clean all that up, put our new seal in, we'll feel it. Well, we'll get it all cleaned up and then we can put the cap back on. All right, got that cleaned up. Get one of our camshaft seals, and everything I'm using is Mazda genuine parts. That's what the kit I ordered came with. Okay, so here's our new seal, same as with the crank seal. The spring side that you can see here needs to face the block, so it goes on like this. And just push it on like so. You push it until you feel the bottom of the seal bottom out against the lower part. And then just put our cam cap back on. And just like that, seal's replaced. And it's super, super easy. Just getting this to seat all the way. Because you want to avoid forcing stuff to seat using bolts unless you have no other choice. Now, about torquing these back in. Apparently the threads are supposed to be oiled when you torque it back in. They're not supposed to be dry. I don't necessarily know what oil. I'm assuming engine oil. So I'm going to dab these suckers up with some engine oil before I attempt to do that final torque. But for the moment, I need to work on the intake side and get that one changed out. So that's what we're going to look like with the original Mazda seals and everything. One thing I just realized is I noticed these seals were brown. I looked at the name. It's National, which is a decent name, but it means these are third party, which means that someone's already done all this. Somebody already went in and redid the crank and the cam seals and the whole 9 yards. So I can tell you that either they didn't care about the fact that the valve cover was leaking or they didn't do the valve cover, because that's why I had to order new timing covers, because the gaskets were completely fragged from swelling up with oil. But it's good to know that somebody was taking care of this. But that also explains why those bolts were so insanely tight. I mean, they made that nice crack when I broke them loose. So yeah, someone didn't do a torque wrench. They just kind of went for it, like what I'm about to do. But anyway, new seals are in, and we'll tighten everything up, and then we'll move on to putting the water pump back in. Okay, I don't know how much video footage I just lost because I was accidentally set to slow motion, but all right. So I got this loose, and what I did is basically you have to pull straight back. I did a lot of wiggling first. I hooked my power steering pump around this bracket right here so it wouldn't try to smash into the radiator. But you just pull it straight back and wiggle, 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 and off she comes. I don't know if that was actually ever replaced in the past, but we'll take a pick and we'll get that guy off and we'll put our new O-ring in. Alright, don't know if you guys can see anything, but fortunately not a great angle for this, because this is really kind of wedged in here. But we're gonna get a hook under this. Oh wow, that was disgusting. Alright, got it out. Here we go. I don't know if that's original or not, but it's just a press fit, so put your new O-ring in and then slam it back together. Okay, next step for us is going to be the water pump. Right, but before we do that, we got to prepare our surfaces. You see we've got gaskety junk all there. That's got to be cleaned off. Gaskety junk there. That's got to be cleaned off. You can use, I'll probably use a razor blade. That's what I'm best with, but razor blade, I'd be really careful using a carbide scraper. This looks to be all cast iron because this is the block proper and not the upper. So you'd probably be all right using a carbide scraper, but you got to get this junk off. It don't need to be perfect, but you need to be able to run your fingers over it and it not feel super lumpy, right? Your gasket will give you a little bit of grace, and if you want more grace, you can throw some RTV on it, which you may have to if your sealing surface is really pitted. And then we can start screwing stuff in. Now, the main pump gasket's only going to go on one way. See that it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolt holes that wind up inside the gasket surface, right? And then the next challenge is, well, how do you get the gasket to stay as we position this in? And one thing we can do is just insert 2 bolts, preferably along the top. I don't remember the orientation of the pump. I'll have to look at it again, to hold this gasket in place, because the bolts will go through and hold it, I won't say tight, but at least hold it well enough in that it'll be aligned, right? We start threading those in, and then the pump's not going anywhere, the gasket's where it needs to be. And once we do all that, then we will concern ourselves with this little inlet pipe on the side. All right, here we go. I had to go find my stuff again. So those are what I'm defining as top. We're oriented like this. Let's see if we can't get these in here without having major issues. Okay, so we're caught on something over there. What are we caught on? We got to kind of, oh, I see. We have to really tuck it in tight. There we go. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So right now we have a bolt. It's just kind of off in space. Wonder how that's going to turn out. And then there's this gaskety thing that it's not sure what it's all about. I guess it's supposed to help make a gasket seal with the covers that you put on. Is my guess. But it's a little bit goofy. I am hoping that I have the right bolts because, as I said, it's been a couple of weeks since I worked on this, and alright, I think that's how we do. It's kind of like this. And then we got to take care of our little other gasket, the thing that goes off to that inlet pipe. And that gasket I actually had to work a bit to track down. So let me show you that. So when you're digging around, most of your water pump kits, they don't come with this square gasket. They come with a round gasket. And if you go to the parts store, it's a round gasket. But it's supposed to be this square one. And that is a Mazda B36615165. But we got to slip that guy in there and then run the bolts through for him. And then, we'll be good to go. As a reminder, he goes right there. Just kind of slip it in, and then you can use the bolt holes to get it lined up and then run it in finger tight. All right, so I wound up, it's 12 millimeter for those bolts, so I needed a wrench for the bottom of the side passage. And I needed a short and a long 12 for all the rest of the bolts and the extension. But with that, and then I took a pick to straighten this seal out so that it would sit correctly. Water pump should be back in and we can keep moving. So next thing back on is our timing cover. And I have a new one of these because I ordered an additional seal kit. So I replaced this seal. It only goes one way. Put that back on. And I think it's those 6 bolts because there's other threaded holes in the cover, but right now they go out into air, which means that something else is going to thread onto that, is my thought. Like I said, it's been a few weeks since I worked on this, so I have forgotten a few things. And we're all going to figure it out together. All right, next up, we need to go ahead and clean the crank because we are going to work on putting the timing belt back in. All right, so let's get down here. Let's get this as clean as we can possibly get it. A little bit of rust spots. We don't want to get a wire wheel or anything on this, but we just want to get as much of the junk and the flash rust and the whatever out of it. And then the next thing we need to do is insert our woodruff key. And the woodruff key only goes one way because the end of it is supposed to have a taper. And I'm looking at my woodruff key, my replacement. It doesn't appear to have much of a taper, so I need to compare that to the old one. But the idea here is you're gonna slide this guy in like that, maybe about like that, and then we're going to put our timing gear on over that. And once the timing gear is in, the woodruff key, takes up space, and that's what actually holds the timing gear on there. I think the factory might have used a little Loctite, I'm not sure, but let me check on that before I commit to this. I mean, the woodruff key appears to fit, but I want to make sure I have the right thing. Did some quick research. I went to Mazda's official part site for the US, and sure enough, that is a compatible key according to Mazda. Alrighty then. So we're gonna, oh, this is gonna be messy. There we go. Not as messy as I thought. So you wind up with something like that. And then what we're gonna need to do is we're gonna need to tap the woodruff key in until it bottoms out. And then in theory, we should not be able to take the timing gear off, right? If we do, well, then we have a problem. So let me get this hammer here, and I'm going to gently, if I can get it in here. All right. Well, timing gear already doesn't want to come off, which is nice. Let me get my mallet or my little 4-pound hammer, which can tap a little better, because I want to make sure that's seated and bottomed out and all that jazz, because if that key comes out, the timing gear comes loose, and then a whole bunch of bad stuff happens really quickly. All right, next up, tensioner. It's going to go on the right side here. Bring you back up, kind of bring you over. So we've got hoses and things in the way, but it's going to go here. It's the only place it can go, honestly. So we'll get this guy installed, and then after him will come the idler, which is a little bit different on the install. Yeah. Get that a little tighter, and then we'll do the idler. All right, so see that little guy, that little hole there? That lines up with this little guy right here. So we need to get him kind of like that, and then you're going to line him up with his bolt. I'll go get that bolt real quick. Key thing about this bolt is we don't want to make it, I don't think we want to make it super tight yet. Crunchy. All right, let me get the 14 out. By the way, these are 14 millimeter bolts. Oh yeah, this is real crunchy. I wonder if this is one of the holes the dirt daubers got into. All right, there we go. All right, so still loose enough that we can wiggle and jiggle, which is important because basically we got to use a spring to hold the pulley in a certain position, or the tensioner, until we get the belt on and everything is happy, and then we'll let that slide to where it needs to slide to and tighten it up. Okay, remember this guy? Yeah, we're using him again. So here's what we got to do. I'm going to bring you in just so you can see it. We're going to hook this guy around our tensioner, right? And then the spring's going to fall out, because that's just how things go with me. But one end's going to hook here. We got to slide this over as far as we can, right? The other end has got to hook around this peg. So you'll want to get yourself some locking pliers, needle nose, whatever, and you're going to need to go from here to there. And I'll get some action on that in a second. I can't do it with both hands holding a camera. And as you can see, the spring just completely ran away out of my boot here. Now, you can reuse your spring, not a big deal, because it's almost never used. And the way springs wear out is by being springy, you know, expand, contract, expand, contract. And this barely does it, so this spring should be perfectly fine. All right, that's what we look like, right? So we're hooked up here, got our cover back on. We're hooked right there. Should be fine, it's not going anywhere. And we're gonna leave that like that for now. And then we need to go ahead and prepare to put the timing belt back on. I lied, we got to put our cam gears back on first. So, a couple things. Number one, your exhaust and intake cam gears are 100% identical. So it really doesn't matter which one goes where. What is important is the lettering, right? So you notice this has an E and an I on it, right? So on the exhaust side, which is going to be this side, on a 1995 1.8 liter anyway, we're going to want our E pointing north, 12 o'clock. Okay, so like that. And then on our intake side, we're going to want the I pointed at 12 o'clock, or as close to it as we can be, because remember when we took all this apart, we tried to put it at top dead center and all that jazz. Turns out we were slightly off, and we will take care of that whenever we put the belt on and all that jazz. But okay, so before we go to, sorry about that. Before we go to put the belt on, we need to go ahead and move our tensioner into the loosest position we can. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to slide it as much as we can. I'll try this one more time. Okay. Whew. So that we do not put tension on the belt, because we're going to need to be moving it around a bit as we go to put this, get it all timed and put it back together. So next thing is we throw the belt on. All right, so I'm going to move my power steering back down so I have a little more visibility. But we're going to run the belt around our stuff. I guess I'm a girly man. I cannot get this to slide on. So I'm going to need to get some more tension there. Yeah. All right. I'll have to work on sliding this on, but you're supposed to get, be able to slip the belt on, providing that you've gotten the tensioner completely into the loosest position you can get it into. So let me fight with that. We'll get that on, and then we'll work on timing it. Okay, so even with this at minimum tension, right, it's gonna just barely fit on there, but you will be able to get it on with your fingers. Okay, not gonna be fun, but you can do it. Okay, now timing. So remember we were supposed to put this at top dead center on cylinder 1, which is our first one in line here. Well, if we gotten it perfect, that notch would line up with that arrow, and then this mark on the tooth, not this eye, but this mark on the tooth, would line up with this punch out under the eye. I guess that's why that's labeled now. They want you to match eye to eye. Haha, eye to eye. So this mark here needs to line up with this. And this mark here needs to line up with this. Which means presently we are not where we want to be. We're probably a tooth or so out of time. So we got to start fixing that. First things first though, now that we've got the belt back on down here, we're not going to mess with this anymore, because we can put our crank bolt back in and we can rotate this where we need to do the thing we got to do. So we're going to go ahead and put our crank bolt and the crank gear cover back in. So keep in mind, you see that? This thing, it has the keying for the woodruff, so it can only go in one way. And also, you see that right there? See that 10? That's supposed to be 10 degrees before top dead center. And if you were needing to do base timing, that's what you'd set it to. But we are not going to worry about that, because at least on this vehicle, the timing was in pretty good shape before I started doing all this. So in theory, if I get that to line up and this to line up and that to line up, we should be good. We should be where we need to be. All right, so next step is we do need to tighten this up, right? And remember, to loosen this, tighten this, we need to have parking brake on, vehicle in 5th gear, all that jazz. And then, I can't remember, is it like a 21 millimeter, something like that? We get this nice and tight. Then we'll start worrying about rotating the crank. Okay, we are now tight. So at this point, what we can do is, however you were choosing to lock your cams, you can go ahead and unlock them. And then we're gonna take the vehicle back, parking brake down, back into neutral, and we're gonna start doing stuff. So let me get this out of the way. Yeah, we'll do stuff. All right, so first step is make sure that we're lined up on the crank. And our arrow does point at our notch, so we are good to go there. We don't need to do anything. Then the next step is we need to check, again, our cams. And as you can see, that's our mark. That's where we need to be. So we are, looks like 1 tooth off on the exhaust cam. And then on the intake cam, we wound up 1, 2, like 3 teeth off. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. So, all right, let's see if I can do this, because we need to rotate this cam. It's going to be to the right. All right, so we're going to slide that off. I'm going to take this and bring it to about there. And then we got to try to put this belt back on. She's not going to be real fun. Yeah, I didn't think so. So if I was a smart man, I'd have one of those ninja tools or whatnot that I could put right here, and that would keep these from rotating. This is gonna be a bear, because I gotta hold it like that, and then I gotta get this tension. How do I want to do this? Oh, now I've made a mess. I have made a mess. Oh boy. not even right. We need to pull. Alright, I think that's where we need to be. The question is, can I get it to stay there? Okay. Yeah, alright. That was entirely not fun. But now if you take a look, and you're actually looking at it dead on, our exhaust timing mark now lines up here with this. The camera may or may not be able to show that well, but if you look at it straight on, it's where it needs to be. So that's where that needs to be. And then now we need to come over here and play with our exhaust cam, and we need to get this fella to rotate. But before we do that, now that we work so hard, sorry, that's our intake cam. We work so hard to get our exhaust cam lined up, we're going to take some zip ties or something, whatever you got on hand, and we're going to lock this up tight so it can't move whenever we pull this tension off. So let's go do that. Okay, that was not nearly as bad with having one of the cams locked down. So now if you take a look, we have, again, you have to be looking at it square on, but we have I pointing at I. Remember our mark for E is right there. E is pointing at E. And then if we come down and we look at our crank timing mark, the pointer is at the notch. So at this point, we should be in time as long as, number one, your timing was okay before you started this. And number two, you did move it up the top dead center like you were supposed to, and where top dead center had this notch either pretty close or you were right on it, right? You weren't 180 off or something like that. Your time should be good. So what we got to do now is we're going to need to release this. We need the spring to pull tension. I'm trying to remember the exact process. I'll probably have to go research it, but we're going to need to adjust our tensioner again because right now it's going to be too loose. Right? We made it as loose as possible so that we can move stuff like this. This is not okay, right? We got to get this tension pulled out. That's no bueno. So let's figure out how we're going to do that. Okay, because I'm paranoid, I went ahead and I took the cover off the timing, the crank gear again, just to make sure that the timing belt was sitting as it should. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to get it to pull the tension out, and the way we do that is we're going to take our 14 and we're going to come back over to our tensioner. We're going to go ahead and, we're going to loosen it up. Okay, so the spring is going to pull it forward to do what it's got to do. And then, now that I've got something pulling tension, I feel comfortable cutting my zip ties here. Make sure that, you don't let zip tie go somewhere it shouldn't. Okay, so now that's done. Next thing we'll do is we're gonna run through a couple of revolutions here, right? We're gonna turn the crank. And what should happen is the tensioner is going to do its tensioner thing, and it should pull the tension where it needs to be in the belt. And after that, we tighten our tensioner. We tighten the tensioner back up, and we can start putting covers on. Okay, so that is parking brake off. We're back in neutral. So this is what I mean. We've loosened up the tensioner, right? So now we start pulling it out through, and that resistance you see is because I don't have spark plugs out, so that is compression that is occurring. And you'll see, you know, your cams rotating and things like that. Just be careful when you come off a compression stroke because it's going to go flying up. And it'll bite you. Okay, so you'll notice now that we've done a couple of turns, this has gotten tight, right? We don't have slack there anymore. And we're also good everywhere else. So at this point, we can go ahead, get our 14. We're going to tighten down the tensioner wherever it sits right now. We're not going to try to move it. And if you feel like you need to snug up your cam gears a little more, you can do that, but we've done it. The water pump's done. The engine is got a new timing belt, and at this point we're putting stuff back together. Okay, if you're following my guide, you don't need to worry about your thermostat or anything because you didn't mess with it. So go ahead, put your lower timing cover back in. You've got a bolt goes here that's short, a bolt that goes over here that is short, and then you have a bolt right here that is long, and that's your lower. Mine looks all shiny and new because these timing covers have glued on seals from the factory. So if your seal got fried by leaking oil from a leaking valve cover gasket or whatnot, pretty much you got to get a new one. As you can see, my old one, gaskets were shot. So that's your bottommost, and then the next one up is this guy. He's got one that you have to bolt back in. And then that gets us to our upper timing cover. And the upper timing cover has replaceable gaskets, and I have those as well. But as you can see, this is also one that's already RTV'd from the factory. All right, so this is our upper cover. As you can see, we have removable gaskets. These were okay, but the kit that I ordered from Treasure Coast Miata, the only way I could get what I needed was I had to also get the uppers. So might as well throw some new uppers in there. By the way, if you do need Miata parts and you are in Florida or maybe surrounding area, Treasure Coast Miata has a lot of inventory. The prices are reasonable. They have kits that they are kind of unique to them for common maintenance items for Miatas. So I would highly recommend them. They don't sponsor me. I paid for all this by myself, but I also had some issues with shipping and they were really good about it. You know, they stayed in communication with me. The customer service was decent, so keep them in mind. Treasure Coast Miata. They're down in Southeast Florida. Hence the name, Treasure Coast. Back where the Spanish misplaced all their treasure chests way back in the day. And it still washes up on shore occasionally, from what I understand. All right, let's get this in here. Okay, so we've got gaskets in there. And then we have this U-shaped gasket. Now check it out. They actually made it so you can't put this in backwards. It's got 3 spots in the gasket that are solid, and you shove that into these 3 little holes. That's how that works. You can probably hear in the background I'm racing the clock a little bit. It is supposed to start raining today and then basically not stop raining for 3-4 days. And I'd really, really like to get the Miata at least mostly back together before that happens. All right, I'm gonna give this a spritz and a spray to clean that off, and then gonna go ahead and reinstall. Go ahead and put our water pump pulley back on. We're not going to be able to get it tight until we get the belts and everything back on, but we can at least get the pulley started, right? So I don't know about you guys, but this is sat half torn into in my yard for a couple weeks now, so I am super excited to be getting all of this back together. Let me tell you. So also, I really enjoy driving this thing, and I hadn't gotten much drive time in before I realized that before I drove it much more, I had to check this. I had to do a timing belt and a water pump and all that jazz. Make sure everything was as it should be. Okay, so in preparation for putting the valve cover back on, which is important to me since it's about to rain, you're going to want to get into these corners around our cam cap seals, and you got to put RTV there, but that means you got to clean the old RTV out. So take that trusty razor blade that I mentioned earlier, get in there, clean around those caps. You also need to clean around where the cam angle sensor goes, back here in this corner. And I didn't do as good a job as I would have liked, and this one's fine. There's nothing you got to do here because there's nothing there. So to get those three straightened out, and then you can go ahead and prep your new gasket. This is the old one, but prep the new one, lay it out in your valve cover, and then we'll take our RTV, we'll squirt those corners, and then we'll bring everything down finger tight. But then comes the tricky bit. You got to wait 20-30 minutes for it to set, and then you have to squish it down to your final torque. If you don't do that, it won't seat right, it'll leak. All right, let's go ahead and get this new one on here. Good thing is this is a nice gasket. Let's see here. So it's got to go like this. Yep, it's got to go like that. Oh, I lied. This has to go over here. Okay. Okay. Lay that out. Yep, it's looking good. Try to get our corners worked in first. Make sure everything lays in like it ought. I like this gasket because it's an insert gasket, so you shove the gasket into the channel and then that's it. You don't have to lay down RTV to make it stick. You're not guessing if you flip this thing over or you move it around. It's not gonna pop out on you. Just get it in there. Get it seated. Just like that, boom, brand new gasket. So don't forget to put your harmonic balancer back on. You got 4 10mm, or if you're like me and you drop one that I'm sure I'll find once I move the car, you can fab one up, put one in there. But do try to have all 4 because you are going to be running pulleys off of it. So the rain stopped for the moment. I'm going to see if I can't get the valve cover on. So cover's in, now for the screws. Okay, we still have all of our screws. All right, let's do that box. We'll start here. That feels good. Come over here. That feels good. Jump over to this one. That's good. Jump over to that one. That feels good. Jump over to that one. That feels good. Jump over here. That feels good. Come over here. That feels good. That feels good. Do our guy in the middle here. That feels good. That feels good. And that feels good. Speaking of accessory stuff, you'll see a couple things have changed. I went ahead and I have 2 brand new belts. I got those looped up and ready to go. Nothing has been tensioned yet, so the alternator still swings freely and the power steering pump still swings freely. In order to get the power steering pump back in, don't forget you've got a really long bolt that runs here. There's a nut that goes here. You need to have the pulley aligned in such a way that you can get access to that nut to tighten it up. All right, let's not forget our PCV. This is supposed to be an improved one because my last one just kind of obliterated itself whenever I took it off. There we go. Get that in position. All right, and that is important because one of the problems this car had when I first got it, it had a bad PCV and it wasn't adjusted for a good working one, and it ran really rough until I fixed that, so don't forget it. Let's get our plugs back in. I put new ones on because my old ones were rat damaged, but you should not need to do that. All right, so that's 2. 3 and 4. Okay. With that, top end of the car is done. Good morning, everyone. Today is a new day. So since I showed how to take all this apart in the beginning of the video, I went ahead and put together the rest from where we left off yesterday. So the radiator went back in. That's just kind of fiddly. In mine, this rail is broke. The welds are broke top and bottom, so that made it even more fiddly. But got that in. So don't forget, you've got your overflow connection here. You've got your upper rad hose here. You have a lower rad hose down over there on that side at the bottom. Don't forget there are 2 nipples that come off of the thermostat housing. Both have a hose that need to be connected. Also, I'd almost forgotten about the power steering indicator. I got that plugged back in. And now we've got that connection and this connection and that connection and that connection. That should be it. Moment of truth. Let's see what we get. Look at that. You wouldn't even know it had been sitting for weeks. So we'll see if she idles down, because right now she's idling kind of high. But it's also cold, so. We'll see how she goes. Other thing to do is you're gonna have air in your cooling system because of how much it got drained. So keep an eye on your temps. That could be a thing. Oil pressure's good. It's nice. So we're gonna let this run for a bit and see if we idle down to, I think for a manual it's supposed to be 700, 750, something like that. Because if she won't come down, that can also be a symptom that you're a tooth off. And then you'll have to tear it all apart and adjust it. But, learning experience, right? All right, after a few minutes, we've idled down to about where we need to be. So that's excellent. Temps are still looking okay. I'm gonna keep an eye on those until the thermostat opens. And I looked out front, I'm not seeing a giant pile of fluid spewing everywhere, so I think we got this one, guys. Check back in a few more minutes to make sure that nothing's going bump in the night here once it warms up. All right, so I just had to shut it off because we were creeping towards H, so I'm gonna go bleed the pressure off the system and see if I can't put some more coolant in, because if you did not know, if you just like bought a Miata and you're going all in on this, Miatas run hot, even when their cooling systems are working perfectly. Doesn't take much for them to get toasty, so you really have to keep an eye on your coolant. All right, I was able to top off the radiator. It took some more, and then I topped off the overflow. So we'll see how we sit now with just idling. Because what will happen over time as the thermostat opens is it will burp out more air from the main cooling system, and then that air will get transferred out into the overflow tank, is what should happen with the way that this cooling system works. But sometimes when you drain it down a lot, what can happen is air bubbles will get stuck, and you just kind of have to work with it until you burp out enough air that you can safely drive around and let it burp out the rest. Alrighty folks, I think we got this one. After I burped the cooling system, temperatures are stable. So I think we're good to go there. Looks like I got a leaking power steering hose I got to deal with, but that wasn't the focus of this video. So we have successfully done a timing job, and the cam seals, and the crank seal, and the water pump, and all those other things you got to do whenever you dig that deep on a 1995 Mazda Miata MX-5. If you found this video interesting, entertaining, please consider like, sharing, subscribing, and I'll catch you guys next time.